Good evening, everybody. What is up? Hopefully, you're enjoying your All-Star break. Oh, nothing new or big happening in daily fantasy. Yeah, right. But it is time for Grinders Live After Dark. I am Dan Bach. You might know me as DB730. I do the little podcast on this little site known as Roto Grinders. And obviously, I don't have nearly as good as an accent as our good friend Gib Pollard, Gibbethy, who normally does these after dark shows when golf is got a major. So he's out down under. Put another shrimp on the bobby. And he can't make the show today. So I decided I'd pinch hit. I sat and kind of researched all sorts of British Open and golf stats. I actually play pretty casually, but excited to try and pass along some of my prep knowledge with you. And of course, the man, the myth, the legend when it comes to daily fantasy, and I say that because the guy is good at just about everything. Golf is no different. One, the only STL Cardinals joins us this Wednesday night. What's going on, Justin? How are you?
Hey, doing pretty good. Nice to see your face here on Grinders Live with all the podcasts and the serious shows that you're doing now. We don't get to see your bright, shining face as often, other than when you pop in the After Dark show. So it's nice of you to pinch it for Gib today, and we'll see if we can, help the users win some money with the only sport in town here for the next couple days.
First off, you said bright, shining face. Is my head that shiny here today? I didn't set up the extra lights or anything, But yes, I've been away for a while, and it's good to be back and doing this. Everybody hears the voice, don't get to see the ugly mug, so you're gonna have to put up with it here for the next hour. But it should be a fun show here because, like you mentioned, we're the only game in town tonight. So sometimes these golf shows get overlooked because you got the grind of baseball and everything else, but there's nothing else. This could not have set up better, certainly for DraftKings, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But I think, Justin, it's safe to say that this is going to be the 1 week that is filled with people playing daily fantasy golf who know really nothing about daily fantasy golf. Now, hopefully this show will help those people who are tuned in, but I promise you there are thousands who won't tune into this. So, as you said before the show, very plus EV to be playing daily fantasy golf this week.
Yeah, and especially when you factor the people that might be coming over from Draft Street to DraftKings with the merger. The DraftKings golf format's a little bit different than the Draft Street format. They have a different scoring setup, different bonuses. And that's something that the maybe players who only played on Draft Street might not be as familiar with. And then just the people who are, mainly around to play baseball and have been bored out of their heads for the last few days. Oh, why not throw a few golf teams together? So I think this is the time. Even if you haven't played much, if you have the ability to do a little bit of research, like an hour of research tonight or whatever, whether that's watching the show or reading some articles. You got 5 hours until rosters lock. They basically lock at 1 in the morning Eastern time, I guess. So you've got time. If you're here tonight, then hopefully you've got some time on your hands to put a team together. And even if you just want to play some double ups or something, this will be the week where it's definitely plus money to try to put in a little bit of time to get some golf knowledge in your brain.
No doubt. And DraftKings, talk about a really good week for them to kind of bring in their the Draft Street players because Draft Street was very popular for golf. I wouldn't say quite as popular than DraftKings, but I'd say it was fairly comparable. But no longer. I mean, seriously, you look at what's already happened. DraftKings filled their $300,000 guaranteed tournament, the Royal Golf Championships, already. That had a $100,000 first place prize, so you can't get into that. And they already sold out one $60,000 guaranteed tournament with a $20 buy-in. And when they put another one out there, first thing that went in my mind was they're going to overlay the heck out of this.
I thought it was a mistake. I thought it was a mistake when I saw it at first.
Me too. I thought it was too. I was like, seriously, another 60,000? It's at 1785, so it's over about half full right now. And I've got a hunch that this one is going to fill as well. So DraftKings is growing at a tremendous pace, especially this is a perfect time for it. They probably could have gone $500,000 prize pool, I think, on that big tournament. But I don't know if they were quite projecting what exactly was going to happen with the merger, but certainly paying dividends already this week. But again, we're going to talk mainly about DraftKings salaries. I do want to let other people know you can play daily fantasy golf over on Draft Day. Fantasy Feud also has some daily fantasy golf contests for you, so you do have a few other options. But clearly, most of the action you're going to find this week going to be on DraftKings. Just a huge player base right now with this merger with DraftStreet. All right, Justin, well, let's get into the analysis. Enough yip-yap. It's 14 minutes of that. I want to have you kind of explain to the audience exactly the layout, the course, and what the players are going to be encountering this week out there across the ocean.
Yeah, it's always a different setup for the Open Championship because the first thing is they do it on kind of a 9-course rotation. So basically there's no course history. The last time the Open was here was 2006. That summer was very dry. The course was basically brown. And every drive got an extra 30, 40 yards simply because of roll. And Tiger Woods was able to take advantage of that. He finished 18 under, which is almost unheard of as far as a score for this tournament. In comparison, Phil Mickelson won last year, and he was the only player under par at -3. Everybody else was even or worse. So you don't generally see that kind of really good scoring at the British Open. And Tiger winning with a -18 in 2006, almost fully a function of the conditions. There were a couple other guys at 16 under that year and a guy at 15 under, I believe. Basically, you can throw the course history at this specific course out the window because the conditions were so different that year. They've had quite a bit of rain this spring and summer, so the course is green, and the rough is much thicker than it was back then. So you're not going to see the type of scoring, and then throw in the fact that you never know what the weather's going to do out there. Currently they're calling for some pretty nasty conditions on Friday. It's not supposed to be that bad tomorrow. But I would be very surprised if you saw a person get to double digits under par, or even maybe 7 or 8 under par. It depends on what the weather does. But with the rough being a lot thicker, it's going to put a premium on guys keeping the ball in the fairway, guys who are a little bit more accurate with the driver, and also guys that can hit for some distance simply because you're not going to get the roll that you have in the past. So the course does have 4 par 5s. It's a par 72. That's another benefit to the big hitters with the 4 long holes that today's big hitters can take advantage of. Most of them are reachable in 2 shots to give you a chance for an eagle, depending on which way the wind is blowing. There are a couple of short par 4s, and there are some holes in the middle that are very difficult. The last 3 holes are going to be ones to keep your eye on. 16 and 18 are both par 5s. It's one of the only courses that ends with a par 5, and the 17th hole is probably the hardest hole on the course. It's a very long par 4. So a lot of things might come down to Sunday, and 16, 17, and 18 on this course with 2 par 5s sandwiched around a very difficult hole could definitely make or break the championship, and make or break who wins some of these big tournaments over on DraftKings. So that's kind of the layout of the course. Again, if you're trying to look at the 2006 history at this specific course, I don't think that's really going to do you much justice. I think the way to look at it is to kind of just see who has success kind of in this links type course, the British Open format in general. It's a different type of golf than what's generally played here in the United States. And, there's certain guys that suits their eye a little bit better than others.
Yeah, the thing about the Open Championship, we got to be proper here. It's not the British Open to the Euros. It's the Open Championship. Is that you get a lot of players that we're not familiar with. You get a lot of European players whose names will not ring a bell, who I think actually will make some pretty solid plays here. And we're going to talk about a few of those guys here because ultimately you got to remember a lot of the competition in these daily fantasy contests, they don't follow the European Tour, and they're certainly probably not going to do that much research on those players. So they'll probably write them off from the beginning, in that they're like, I've never even heard of this guy. It might be a solid play this week. So we're going to go over some of those random names. I found a few that I think stand out to me that look like pretty good values. And STL or Justin has already written a tremendous column here on Roto-Grinders, kind of talking about some of his favorite plays. I'm sure he'll rehash some of those, but definitely check that out if you haven't done so already. One thing that I found interesting, do you put any stock into this? I think the last 3 winners of the British Open have been over the age of 40. Is that something you look at? Is that a trend? Is that experience? Or is that just, random? What's your take on that?
No, I think there's something to be gained from it, mainly with the experience factor. I'm getting a lot of feedback there. Hopefully, all right. I think it's better now.
Yeah, you sound fine.
Okay, I'm getting feedback on my end. So I don't know if that's me or but anyway, I think there's something to be gained from the experience playing this type of golf. So I think the guys that have won it in the past, being over the age of 40. I think it's mainly a factor of experience, and you play on links courses. Some people play this year round if they're on the European tour, and the fact that most of them are over the age of 40, I think, is a little bit of a fluke. But I think there's definitely something to be said for having experience on this specific type of course, I guess, is the most precise way to put it.
I'm going to make a quick mic change here, so I'm going to let you kind of get started talking about the top tier guys, because obviously, you look at the salary structure on DraftKings. I think you can get 2 of the really marquee names in there. So I'm curious how you kind of rank the guys over, say, 10K here this week on DraftKings.
Yeah, thankfully I wasn't the only one hearing feedback there. I was like, what in the world is going on? So definitely the chat's getting an echo there. So as far as the 10K plus guys, the guy I wrote up in my article first and foremost was Henrik Stenson. I think Adam Scott is going to be the highest owned guy. That doesn't necessarily make him a poor play, but you have to weight it in a GPP. Am I willing to go with the field and take Adam Scott, or do I want to pivot to a guy that I think might be less owned? In cash games, I would probably endorse Adam Scott as the top play. I mean, he's the top player in the world, though barely right now. He's made every cut this season, and he always tends to show up for major championships. Now, he's had some Sunday meltdowns, but he's as consistent as they come, and he's playing great golf right now. So for cash games, sure, I think Adam Scott's your top option. And in GPP, I think there's a lot of merit to playing the pivot because you have other guys that can win a golf tournament just as easily. So if you want to do that, Stenson's the guy I wrote up in my article. He's playing absolutely fantastic golf right now. He has top 7s in 5 of his last 6 starts worldwide. He was second in his last tournament, and he has 3 top 3s in his history at the Open Championship, including, I believe, a second-place finish last year. So everything's aligning for Stenson to have a good week this week. The only question I have with Stenson, and this might be something that we can talk about here for a minute, in the first 2 rounds he's paired with Tiger Woods, and I think that some players that would affect more than others. I think maybe he's got a very calm demeanor on the golf course. I don't really take that as a negative for Stenson, but he's in a group with Angel Cabrera and Tiger Woods. That's going to have the most media attention following it. It's going to be a circus for a couple days. Is that something that would worry you with Stenson, or do you think that that's kind of overblown by the media?
I think it's something to look at, and I think it would be a bigger deal if this tournament was in the States. I think the fact that it's being taken place, across the ocean, I think it makes a big difference. These courses are absolutely massive, and yeah, there's going to be more attention. But this isn't the Masters. This isn't the This isn't the media that he has to deal with here on the American side of things. I've been to tournaments where Tiger's playing, and you really can't put into words the difference between playing with him and without him. I mean, it's absolutely night and day. The attention you get is through the roof. I think Stenson's going to be okay, but I do think that is a pretty solid reason to maybe not go that route, but the form is too good. I hate to say it. Like, I don't know. I think this is almost a tournament where you have to have exposure on multiple lineups to guys because there's just so many guys that could go off here. And, picking between Stenson and Scott, for me, it's like a coin flip, really. I mean, the salaries are so close. It's $400. It's not that big of a difference. And I think they're both just in a tremendous position. I mean, you look at the last 5 tournaments, tied for second, tied for fourth, fifth, 7th, tied for 34th, and 5th. Absolutely amazing. Hasn't missed a cut for Stenson since 2011 in a major championship. That's a wow. I mean, especially for a guy like him who, he's a good player, but people don't look at him in the same light that they do Rory McIlroy, certainly Adam Scott, and some of the other players out there. So Stenson, for me, is definitely going to be one of my high-end guys that I'm looking at. If I had to choose between him or Scott, if I was playing one team, I think I would take Adam Scott. His last 14 majors, you're looking at 8 top 10s, 3 other top 25s, and second and third in the last 2 Open Championships. I mean, everything lines up for him to, finally kind of close the door on this Open Championship. So if I had to choose, I'd take Adam Scott, but I've got no problem with Henrik Stenson. Now, Rory McIlroy is one guy who I think you would agree with me. If there's one guy who could blow out the field, it's probably Rory. But I get a little bit worried about him for 2 things. First off, his ball flight. He hits it really high comparative to most players out there. And in this environment, it doesn't really sell for him. And for a guy who's from like this part of the world, I was shocked to kind of see this quote. Said, this is from Rory McIlroy. Yeah, I'm not a fan of golf tournaments that the outcome is predicated so much on the weather. It's not my sort of golf. My game is suited for basically every golf course and most conditions, but these conditions I just don't enjoy playing in, really. The bottom line, I'd rather be playing where it's 80 degrees and sunny, not much wind. End of quote. It's the thing that worries me is, remember before the U.S. Open, quotes that Bubba Watson had about the golf course, and he didn't really like it, got these weeds all over the place. He kind of had that attitude like, this doesn't fit my game well, and he came out and put an absolute stinker up. And with Rory coming out saying all these things about not really playing in bad conditions and likely going to have some, that worries me a good bit on using him over somebody like Adam Scott or Henrik Stenson.
Yeah, and I'll add to that a little bit. McIlroy has come out and said that the Friday thing is in his head. I know you've noticed this. I remember you tweeted it out. This may have been a couple months ago right now, but McIlroy was in first in a tournament after Thursday, and honestly on Friday he was in danger of missing the cut for a while. He had a terrible round on Friday, and if you go back his last 6, 7, 8 tournaments, he's had terrible Fridays every time, and he's admitted it's a mental thing, it's in his head. Golf is a mental game, and guess what? Friday's the day where the weather's supposed to get bad and the wind's going to pick up, and that's not a good sign for, like you mentioned, his high ball flight. So you add in the negative confidence that he has on Fridays in general, plus the fact that the weather might get bad and that he's already freely admitted that drives him nuts. You could see a total meltdown for McIlroy on Friday. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes out and shoots a great round tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised if he's leading the tournament after the first round. And then if the weather gets bad on Friday, I wouldn't be surprised if you saw him completely collapse. So I really don't think you can justify him over a guy like Scott. I don't think you can justify him over Stenson. I don't even think you can justify him over Sergio Garcia, another guy I really like this week. Garcia loves links golf. He's in the right frame of mind right now. And, if he's going to win a major, this would probably be the one that he's going to get. So I like Garcia, even better than Rory as well. Now, McIlroy's a great GPP play. Again, neither of us would be shocked if he goes out and wins the tournament. But that whole Friday thing and him admitting it's in his head and then the course thing, Bubba Watson missed the cut at the U.S. Open. And luckily I faded him that week in part because of those comments that he made. So I'm a lot cooler on McIlroy than I thought I was going to be going into the week. I think a lot of people will be on him simply because it's the Open Championship and it's in his neck of the woods. But I'm really not feeling it a whole lot this week.
Yeah, he's not a guy who that kind of format of golf, even though he might have played it a bunch growing up, It seems like he even said it. Give me 80 degrees and no wind. I think most people would take 80 degrees no wind over that. But,
yeah, we all like that.
But he's pretty freaking talented. I mean, the sad thing is, like, if he gets through Fridays, he probably would have 2 to 3 more wins at least this year on tour, likely because he is just a birdie machine out there. Unfortunately, follows up 3 birdies with 2 double bogeys, and it doesn't do you any good. So that's the problem, the risk that you run with Rory McIlroy. Well, we've got to mention him, Tiger Woods. 10-3 is the price on FanDuel tonight. You've got him, you've got Martin Keimer, and obviously Sergio Garcia, who you talked about, and Matt Kuchar, the other guys over the 10K. I'm going to first start with Kuchar. I am off Kuch today. He's really never finished better than 9th in an Open Championship, and I just don't feel this is the spot for him to get his. He's a great player. He's had a nice year, a very good year, to be honest with you, but I just don't think he comes close to matching some of these other guys. So for me, I'm totally off Matt Kuchar. I'm with you on Sergio. I wish his price was a little bit less, but maybe the fact that he's over 10K, he won't have a high ownership. But I agree. If he is going to win a major championship, I think it's going to be the British, and he's somebody who's had a lot of success in this tournament in the past. So I don't him. I think he's going to get a major at some point in time. It's funny because you always look for these good stories, and last year it was Mickelson. Remember talking about this last year, Justin? What did people say about Phil? Always sucks in the British Open. Can't win the British Open.
Never going to win the British Open.
Never going to win it. What did he do? He won it. So great develop in this tournament a lot, and I could see Sergio potentially being that. Now let's get to 2 guys here. First off, your thoughts on Keimer, who has 2 of the biggest wins this year, the Players and the U.S. Open, over the last couple of months.
Yeah, the big thing in daily fantasy, we always talk about the what have you done for me lately factor. Everyone who rostered Martin Keimer at the U.S. Open is really happy with Martin Keimer right now, and they're more than willing to go right back to Martin Keimer because he won the money the last time. And, even people that weren't on him, well, I'm not going to make that same mistake twice, because if you didn't follow the U.S. Open at all, he demolished the field. I mean, I had that weekend off. It was my birthday weekend. It was Father's Day weekend. And I was all set to just hang around and do nothing and watch golf all weekend. And the tournament was basically over before the weekend started, which was relatively disappointing. Great for Keimer. He seems like he's a good guy and all that. He screams fade to me this week, and there's really nothing to back it up. I mean, I can't back that up with data other than I think he's going to be over-owned. Relative. You look at, he won the U.S. Open, he won the Players' Championship, although he almost collapsed on Sunday. Outside of that, he has no top 10s in the last 8 months. So it's not like he's performing like this consistently. You can make the argument that he's a big stage kind of guy, and I could maybe buy that. I mean, obviously, winning the U.S. Open is no cakewalk, and winning the Players is no cakewalk. Those are 2 tough courses. That those 2 tournaments were played on. So maybe this style suits him well. He's a great ball striker, so if the weather gets bad, that's where he's going to be at an edge over the field. He's going to keep the ball in the fairways. So things do set up for him well. But it's not like he's a guy like Adam Scott or Henrik Stenson that's just been consistently logging top 10s. And for a guy that's $10,500, I'm not seeing it this week. I think he's going to be highly owned because of the things that I mentioned. So to me, that has me off of Keimer. I'm not on him. Same with Tiger Woods. I mean, maybe if you're running a ton of multi-entry lineups, you can throw Tiger Woods on a couple of them. But even when he was playing this year before the surgery, he wasn't putting well. He wasn't getting birdies on par 5s, which is almost unheard of for Tiger Woods. He's only played 1 tournament since he's come back, and he missed the cut there. Yes, he says he's feeling better, but he's another guy that people are just going to look to because he's Tiger Woods, and I think he's going to be highly owned. Can he win the tournament? Sure he can if he gets going. But Keimer and Woods are just 2 guys that I'm finding myself, if you consider it like a stock market, like a lot of people like to compare it to, where are the ownership percentages of Keimer and Woods going to be compared to where you think they'll perform? I think they're both going to be overvalued, and for that reason, I'm not very high on either one.
Yeah, I actually don't think Tiger is going to be that highly owned in this tournament. I do think that Scott and Stenson are going to be the two high-end guys who people are going to look at the most, believe it or not. It's surprising to say that, but I think, especially Scott, I think he's going to be really highly owned. But it's funny, I almost overlooked him here. There's only a guy who's won the last 2 tournaments he's played in at 10-6, and I almost passed him by, in Justin Rose. It's hard to win 3 tournaments in a row, but nobody is in better form than this guy. How do you handicap him? I mean, is he somebody that, you look at his history in this tournament, not particularly great. So he does have that going against him, but nobody's hitting the ball better than he is.
Yeah, definitely a guy who's in good form right now, and that has me a lot higher on him than I otherwise would have been. I don't think you can put a ton of stock into his Open history simply because it's been played on a different course every time he's played it. So I would say that his current form is probably the most important, more so than his record in this event. Obviously, you think he'll be comfortable here, being a British player. So I think Rose is perfectly fine. I think maybe as far as the high-end guys that are safer picks, that might go a little under the radar if you're wanting to go away from Scott or Stenson in a GPP. I think Rose is probably the safest that you'll get, because obviously we've beaten to death how McIlroy is not safe by any means. Keimer and Woods certainly not the safest options on the board. I think Rose would be that safety net of high-end guys if you're looking to pivot off some of the others with higher ownership percentages.
All right, let's go to the next grouping, like below 10,000, between 9 and 10. On the high end, you've got last year's champion Phil Mickelson, Jason Day, Graham McDowell, Jordan Spieth, Dustin Johnson, Jim Furyk, Ricky Fowler, Bubba Watson, Zach Johnson, and Lee Westwood and Luke Donald. Those guys kind of fall into this category here. I'm going to give you a couple of my guys I really like. First off, I think Dustin Johnson, you look at what he's done on links-style courses. In the majors, you could probably say he's played in about 8 majors where it's kind of a links-style course, either British Open, a lot of U.S. Open courses as well. He's got top 10s in 5 of those. Really fits his style. And you mentioned this is a course that has 4 par 5s, very reachable into one of the biggest hitters in all of the tour. I think that we talk about this also being a tournament where it's a good opportunity for people who've never won a major to come through. This could be the spot for Dustin Johnson. I don't think he's going to be owned very highly, and out of that grouping, I like him, and I really like Ricky Fowler. I've got a question for you, STL. Now, this kind of makes sense because I just mentioned his name, but he's one of only 2 guys with top 10 finishes in the first 2 majors. Do you know who the other guy is?
Is it Jordan Spieth?
Don't believe it's Jordan Spieth. I think it's Jimmy Walker, believe it or not. Dynamite.
That might be right.
Yeah, Jimmy Walker. But Ricky Fowler, both majors, had top 10 finishes there, 5th and 2nd. He's got a new swing coach in Butch Harmon. The problem is with him, he's kind of inconsistent. But you know what? The inconsistency really happened after the Masters. He had that solid finish there, and then the Open. I think that there's several guys, including, like I say, Fowler and Dustin Johnson, in this range between 9 and 10K that I really like, that I think have a good chance of breaking through and getting their first major. What do you think of those guys and other people in that range?
Yeah, Dustin Johnson's a guy I put in my article. Pretty much agree with everything you said there. He's a guy who can simply overpower a golf course, and on a course with 4 par 5s, that's the courses you want to take him on. You mentioned his success on link-style courses in the past. The key for him will be if he can make putts. If he makes putts, I think he's got a great chance to win the tournament. I believe he was in the lead or close after Friday last year and melted down on the weekend and fell to like 32nd or something like that. But he played great on Thursday and Friday. He just needs to sustain 4 consistent rounds. So in that grouping, I think Dustin Johnson's a great pick. I think maybe with some of the publicity that he's gotten, around here and on some other things that I've read this week, I think he'd be a little more highly owned than he otherwise would have been. But I still think he's a great play. Fowler, I think he's a really good play for GPPs. Cash games, the inconsistency at times still worries me, but I can't deny the way he's played in the majors so far this year, the current form, and his new swing coach. It all appears to be coming together for him. So I like Dustin Johnson a lot better than I like Fowler, but I don't mind either guy. And then speaking of Spieth, I went and looked that up after you asked me that question. Spieth was second at the Masters and 17th at the U.S. Open. So close to having top 10s in both, but sandwiched around that. So Spieth was second at the Masters, 12th at the RBC Heritage, 4th at the Players Championship, 14th at the Crowne Plaza, 19th at the Memorial, 17th at the U.S. Open, 11th at the Quicken Loans, and 7th at the John Deere Classic. That's 8 top 10s since the or 8 top 20s, excuse me, since the Masters for Jordan Spieth. He's one of those guys that you can just throw the experience thing out the window. Last year was his first Open Championship. Everyone was off of him because they said it's his first Open Championship. There's no way he's going to do well. And he hung right in there the whole weekend and finished near the top. So he's the face of golf in the United States, whether the Tiger Woods apologists want to believe that or not. Spieth is kind of the guy, and he's the guy that a lot of people are rooting for. He always has a very high ownership percentage these days, so I think he's fine. He has admitted that the link style game, fits him well. So if you're looking for another safe pick in that price range, I think Spieth's a good option. And I like Graham McDowell as well. Has mentioned that he loves playing when the weather gets bad. So if the weather kicks up, that'll give an edge to McDowell a little bit. Mickelson, I'm off of. I mean, before last year, everyone was saying he's never going to win the Open Championship, and it's very hard to win this twice in a row. So I just don't see the value in Mickelson at 9,900. I like a lot of these other guys better. Jason Day's been hurt and has withdrawn from some tournaments recently with a thumb injury, so I'm off of him as well. If I had to pick one more guy in that tier, other than the guys that you mentioned, I'd probably maybe take a look at Lee Westwood. It worries me, though. He's missed his last 2 cuts, and his form isn't that great. So I've cooled on him, but he's definitely a sleeper. I don't think a lot of people will pick him at that price. And the fact that he's basically been hit or miss to make the cut, but he's a guy who can do some damage in a GPP for a low ownership percentage if you want to take a flyer on somebody. And Bubba Watson, you mentioned his comments at the U.S. Open. I believe, I did not see this myself. It was somebody in chat that was talking about it, so I haven't looked it up yet. But Bubba Watson's been making similar comments about this course. So I don't know what's going on with Bubba right now, but I'm going to steer clear of him for the most part this week too.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on Graham McDowell. I think he's kind of like, I don't even know if he's in a back seat to Dustin Johnson or Ricky Fowler for me. He's right there. He's really been good on the Euro Tour this year. He's been okay on the PGA, making cuts, not really finishing top 10s. But you look at some of his finishes so far this year. He finished first out in France about 2 weeks ago. Irish Open, I believe a week or two before that. I think it was, about a week or two before that. Had a top 6 finish over there. And I think it's setting up for him pretty well here. So I think Graham McDowell in that mid-range, if you're looking for somebody who's not on the upper tier, is somebody to look at. Completely agree with you on Mickelson. Don't mind Day. He seems to show up on the majors. The injury is a bit concerning. I think he'll have really low ownership. So if you want to go that route in a GPP, I'm all right with it. I'm with you on Bubba. Not really interested. I don't mind Zach Johnson. I think that he's another guy who, think often gets overlooked, but pretty consistent player. And he said that he loves playing the British Open. He said, the hardest thing is the travel getting out here, but when I actually do get here, I love it. So I'd rather embrace somebody like him who likes playing these type of courses as somebody like maybe Bubba or Rory, who obviously have shown that they don't really enjoy it. As for Lee Westwood, here I totally agree with him. Here's a guy. Last 3 or 4 years in the British Open, he's got 2 top 3 finishes past 4 years. But he's also missed the cut in 4 of his last 5 tournaments, including what he's done on the European Tour. So he did have a top 10 in the Masters. He did get a win in Malaysia. but he is strictly a GPP play. Don't even consider him in any sort of 50-50 or cash game because the volatility that he brings and the price that he brings just doesn't make it worth it. If you're playing a large field tournament, I think he's going to be relatively low owned because I agree. I think he's really overpriced. But he's kind of just like Dustin Johnson, Ricky Fowler, guys who are really good, who you're waiting for them to win a major, and they haven't done it. And, if we told you, a year or two ago that, Lee Westwood still wouldn't have a major, we probably would have said, who are you crapping? Like, he was right there time after time, and he just seems to show up in these tournaments. So certainly don't think he is the worst option out there. We will get some questions towards the end of the show in the chat, so don't think that we are not going to get to those. I promise you that we certainly will. Now we move down to the next range, the kind of $8,000 players, and surprisingly, not a lot here that I love. I mean, I think there's certainly some guys that you could go to. I think you wrote up Brandt Snedeker today. I kind of like Paul Casey at 85 or 8,400. His game has really kind of done a 180 over the last year, and he's been in contention in several tournaments. And there's somebody goes by the name of Josh Culp, Future of Fantasy, writes a great column. And one of the courses that he said kind of matches up with the course they're playing this week is the Memorial out there. And Paul Casey had a really good day there, tied for 13th. And I think he's somebody that not a lot of people are going to consider, who I kind of like today. But who do you like in that 8K range over on DraftKings this week?
Yeah, Casey's a good pick. He's an Englishman as well, so he likes this type of this format. He's in great form right now, and he's a guy that will definitely fly under the radar. Not a lot of people know about him. He's been playing really good golf. He's kind of smattered himself around the top of leaderboards this spring and summer. The problem for him has been, like it is for a lot of guys, being able to put together 4 consistent rounds without having one where he just kind of removes himself from contention with a really poor round. So, again, if the weather becomes a factor and he gets rattled a little bit, that could be a concern. But for a mid-range price tag kind of guy, I think he's a guy you can look to. And this kind of is where you start getting into the traps, because there's a lot of very seasoned PGA Tour golfers whose games are not fit for links courses very well that you're going to see in this 7 to 8K range. You'll see guys that gamers will just gravitate to because they're 21 for 22 in cuts made on the PGA Tour. But the reason they're so cheap is because their game does not translate as well to the link style course. I know I put a few of them in my article. Chris Kirk is one. Brandon DeYoung is one. Charlie Hoffman's another one. He's really cheap. Don't get sucked in by the trap of these guys. Oh my gosh, it's this really good golfer and he's super cheap. A lot of these guys, their game just doesn't work on the link style course, and that's why they play most of their tournaments on the PGA Tour. They like that American style track a little bit better. So this is where you can start getting into that. Jason Duffner does not have a very good career at the Open and has not been playing well of late. I don't really care for Jimmy Walker despite his success this year on this type of track. And Keegan Bradley had a pretty good year last year at the Open, but other than that has been underwhelming. So those are kind of guys that I think most people will go after, but I think Casey makes a better play than all of them. I think Thomas Bjorn makes a pretty good play as well. And a guy that I've seen a lot of people talking about this week that really surprises me is Mikko Ylönen. I don't really admittedly know that much about him. He's basically a European-only player, but I know he's playing well right now. I wish he wasn't 8K. I mean, it's hard to take a guy, just based on what you're reading about him that you don't know anything about for 8K. So I think he could be a great flyer. I think he maybe works a little bit better on draft day where he's cheap as opposed to 8K on DraftKings. I think there's some other sleepers that I like a little bit better. But in terms of that range, I think Casey's a great play. Obviously, I wrote up Snedeker. Matsuyama might fly a little bit under the radar. He was just coming over and got his PGA Tour card and then played in the Open Championship last year and didn't miss a beat, and I believe finished 9th or around the top 15 somewhere. So I think he could be under the radar this week. He's buried a lot of people. He's been dealing with some various injuries over the last 6-8 months, but he can go low. So I like him for 8,600. But I think there's some traps down there, like I mentioned, with guys like Walker and Duffner. I just don't see them translating well to this tournament.
Yeah, I think we could throw Mahan and even Webb Simpson in that realm as well. Kind of big name American players that might not be the best spot for them. As for Mikko, I'll tell you the reason why some people are interested in him. He actually won the amateur out there. I don't know if it's called the Euro Amateur, probably. That's my guess. In 2000, also tied for 16th in 2006 at that course. And I think that's a big reason why people are looking to him. Tied for 16th last week in the Scottish Open. But you're right. If he's 5K, 5,600, sure. But 8K, there's a handful of guys I really kind of like less than him that I don't think I need to really go that route. So I agree. When you talk about no-name guys out there who have a good shot in this tournament, he might be one of them, but for whatever reason, DraftKings decided to price him up instead of some other guys. So I don't know how highly owned he's going to be because of that, but you're right. I've seen some people show a little bit interest in him. Well, now it's time to kind of get to the lower tier guys here, Justin. This is honestly, this is the key to winning these things. You've got to find the relative no-name who goes through and has a big day. Now, obviously, Martin Keimer winning the U.S. Open by like 9 strokes, that's one thing. That's really what you need, but that doesn't happen all that often. So usually the make-or-break guys are on the lower end, so you can afford some of the more expensive guys. What do you want to put the ownership of Francesco Molinari here in the $20 GPP tournament that they have over on DraftKings, the 60K tournament? I think it's going to be really high.
Yeah, this is what makes it interesting because it depends on the volume of people that are just playing PGA this week just because. And it doesn't take a ton of research this week to realize that Molinari is kind of mispriced where he's at. Also, be careful. There's an Eduardo Molinari playing as well. He's not the one you want. It's Francesco. He's made the cut in his last 4 majors, played well at the Open last year, and he's just playing pretty good golf. I mean, he's a very good golfer. I believe he's a future major champion. It's not like he's a flyer for the talent that he has, and given past success in the majors. I mean, he's made 4 straight cuts. He's as safe as it gets for anybody, like probably even 7,500 or below to make the cut, and he's 5,800 on DraftKings. So if people are paying attention and doing any amount of research at all, I think he'll be highly owned. There's also merit to fading him in a GPP if you want to, simply because it's golf. I mean, there's a 20% chance that anybody misses the cut, just because if you have one bad round or you get thrown into a time where the weather kicks up really bad, bad luck sometimes plays a role too. But I would not be surprised to see him, even being the lesser known guy that he is, I wouldn't be surprised to see him over 50%. I would think he'll be right there with Adam Scott as the highest owned guy. I think his name's gotten out there enough. We're talking about him on here. I've seen him in various chats and things, and the forum thread that has a couple pages worth of information right now on our forums here at RotoGrinders. So I think the word has gotten out enough, and enough sharp golf players are playing this thing that he'll be 50% owned or in that range. I think if you're only playing one team, you have to play him. If you're playing, say, 6 or 8 rosters, if you throw him on half or something like that, I just don't think you want to get too cute with how cheap he is, because you can put him in there and fit like 4 really good players into your lineup alongside him. So 5,800, I think that's a great price for him.
Let me just throw one thing real quick on that. I think he'll actually be maybe that 50% in the $200 game, because there you'll have way more sharper players.
I think that's fair. Yeah, that's fair.
You look at that $100,000 guarantee or first place payout. You've got guys like CSU and just the sharp Empire Maker. I mean, these guys are just really sharp when it comes to golf. They're going to pick up on it. They're going to put multiple lineups, and they're going to use at least him in half of those. Yep. But maybe the $20 game could be more like 35 to 40%, which still could be pretty high. And I'm not against the fade here, and I'll tell you real quick why, but and then I'll let you kind of go back on some more sleepers for people. He's been really good in the U.S., but you know what? He missed the cut last week in Scotland, and I don't think he's anywhere near a sure thing, like you talked about. It is golf. Things happen, and he's good, but you know, this isn't like, you know, a situation where, you know, you've got a potential a guy who a lot of people are looking at to win the tournament. I mean, this guy, you're hoping he makes the cut, and it's far from a sure thing. So if I had a team, honestly, in that big tournament, I think I would probably go contrarian simply because I think he's going to be really highly owned in that, and I don't think it's anywhere near a sure thing, and there's a couple names who I like a little bit better. So I wanted to throw that out there, considering, you know, all the talk around Molinari being the top play. So, okay, let's we talked about him. Give me some other guys you like on the cheap today.
Yeah, if you want to go really low, I think there's a guy at 4,200 you can take, and I think there's a guy at 4,900 you can take. The really cheap guy is Oliver Fisher. He's a British player, and it seems like every year there's kind of a no-name British guy that just comes out and does well. I believe he's finished in the top 25 in each of his last 3 starts in Europe, so he's playing good golf right now. He's obviously familiar with the link style, and he's basically minimum price. So if you want to go super, super cheap, I think Oliver Fisher's the guy you go with. I have him probably on 10% of my rosters, I would say. I've got Oliver Fisher on there because you can basically pair him with anybody. If you put Fisher and Molinari on your team, you can basically get any other 4 golfers you want. You can get Adam Scott with Henrik Stenson, with Matt Kuchar, you know, and Sergio Garcia. You can really get any of the 4 guys you want if you pair those 2. I don't think that's a poor strategy at all in a GPP. Maybe you hope, you know, at least one of those 2 cheaper guys makes the cut. So I think Oliver Fisher's in play at 4,200, and not a ringing endorsement by any means, but I mean, we're talking bottom of the barrel guys here, so you got to temper your expectations a little bit. And you also have Justin Leonard down there at 4,900, a former Open champion, a guy who made the cut last year and did fairly well. I mean, I think he finished in the 30s, but he has a ton of history at the Open. He hasn't lost all his form like a lot of these other older guys, like a Tom Watson or something like that. Justin Leonard's still playing relatively good golf on the PGA Tour, and he's got the history at this event. We talked about the last 3 champions being over the age of 40. I think he's significantly safer than Fisher is, and you know, I wouldn't put him that far below Molinari on my list of, you know, projections. And he's 900 cheaper, and he's contrarian. So those are the 2 guys really that I've looked at under 5K. I know there's some other guys. People sent tweets and messages asking about some other guys. I think there's other guys, obviously, that have the potential to make the cut. I don't think they're as safe. So those are the 2 I'm looking at kind of below 5K. If we didn't really mention a whole lot of guys in the 7K range, but I think Angel Cabrera, I mentioned he's in that group with Henrik Stenson and Tiger Woods. He's playing great golf right now. I don't like the fact that he's either a top 10 or a miscut kind of guy, probably more of a GPP play. I think he'll be fairly highly owned. Given the fact that he won his last tournament out, and he's 7,600. That seems a little light for me with the way he's been playing. So Cabrera, I think, is a good golfer to take this week at that price range. Robert Karlsson is kind of flying under the radar, another guy, another Swedish player similar to Stenson that has a lot of talent that could pay off for his 7,600 price tag. I think he'll be significantly lower owned than Cabrera if you're looking for a GPP pivot. And then the one guy that I would endorse, I mentioned I don't like those, you know, the U.S. guys that haven't shown a ton of history on links courses. I will make one exception for Brendan Todd because he's been playing such great golf. If you look at his history, starting at the Byron Nelson on May 15th, he won that tournament, followed it up with a 5th at the Crowne Plaza, an 8th at the Memorial, a 17th at the U.S. Open, and then a 5th and a 4th since then. So that's top 8 finishes in 5 of his last 6 tournaments, along with the 17th at the U.S. Open. So he is locked in right now. He's a guy that people will look to simply because he's made 20 out of 22 cuts, and he's $7,400. I think he's the guy you want to go with if you want a U.S. guy, maybe that hasn't proven much on a links course yet. I know there's several other, you know, sharp players this week that like him as well. So I think Brendan Todd at 7,400 could be a popular play. People are going to ask about Ernie Els, another guy I wrote up in my article. his current form is not that great, but you can't deny his history at the Open. 20 for 23, I believe, in his career, making cuts at the Open. So if you want a safe pick to make the cut, maybe for a cash game, I think that's the format you'd want to look to him in.
All right, I'm going to throw some names out. First off, under 5K, the one guy I have is Justin Leonard. I think Oliver Fisher, a little bit looking at him when you were talking, I do kind of like him at 4,200 as well. But Leonard, at this point in time, at that price point, all you're really looking for is a guy to make the cut. And he has done that time after time this season. And he's done it in tough tournaments. You know, the Memorial, the Players, the U.S. Open. You know, this isn't just a guy who's going into the Greenbrier and the John Deere Classic and these, you know, smaller, you know, lesser-known tournaments where the fields are watered down and making cuts. You know, the Memorial, Players, and U.S. Open are about as tough of fields as you're going to find. And he made the cut in all three of those. Top 15 last year in the Open Championship. And bottom line, you said it, former champ, 3 top 10s all time in the Open. Form is there. I don't see any reason not to throw him in as a flyer at 4,900. I wouldn't even be against it in a cash game. I think that you need to find some low-tier guys, and I think he's one that I feel pretty confident. And when I say pretty confident, you can probably put it at like 65%. He might make the cut. That might even be too high. Probably more like 50% at that price point, and you're kind of excited about it. So I like Leonard a good bit this week. I'm going to throw some random names out that people probably don't know. Christopher Broberg, first guy, 6,100. Top 15 in three of the last 4 tournaments, and also a second in the Scottish Open last week, third in the Irish Open a couple of weeks prior to that at the end of June. So he's only 6,100. I like him better than Molinari based on experience here, recent form, and you're only talking 300 more than him. And the ownership level is going to be way lower. So I think Christopher Broberg is somebody to consider at 6,100. Another name who's a little bit more expensive, and I think he's more contrarian, probably more tournament play, Rafa Cabrera Bello, 6,500. He's made 9 straight cuts there on the European Tour and lost in a playoff a few weeks ago in the BMW. So I think he's a good guy who can make the cut for you. Maybe not compete to win, but at 6,500, you just want him to kind of make the cut. Danny Willett, I kind of joked about him earlier. Well, you know what? I do like him. 11th, 8th, 3rd in his last 3 European Tour tournaments, top 15 last year in the Open Championship. And to make things a little bit better, even sweeter for you, he made the cut in the U.S. Open, which was a very tough course out there. So Willett is 6,500. I think he is somebody to consider. And my fade of the day on the cheap guys, Miguel Angel Jimenez. He's 7,200, so he's a bit more expensive. And Vegas has him at like a 75-1 long shot, which maybe that's a little bit better spot where you take a shot on him, because I don't see him winning this tournament at all. I don't know. Top 25 in the last 3 Open Championships, always seems to compete but ends up fading. But I think he's been around enough in rounds 3 and 4 where people will kind of give him a shot in their lineups. But I think I'm going to fade Miguel Angel. I've got great hair and smoke stogies and drink wine on the golf course, Jimenez. So those are my kind of thoughts on him. And one more, I don't have my list of information on him, but KJ Choi is somebody who I think could be sneaky this week. Again, maybe not to win, but to potentially make the cut. So anything there that you totally disagree with?
No, I really like Choi. I think he's 6,200, something like that. Good history at the Open, so I'm with you on him. Miguel, I'm off of him. He doesn't have the length anymore, and with the rough being higher and potentially some rain, balls aren't going to roll as much. So I just don't think he has the length to compete with some of the big hitters these days. So totally with you on both those guys. Cooled a little bit on Willett. I did read something that Willett is dealing with a bit of a shoulder injury. That's always a concern for a golfer. So I'd need to read up on that a little bit more. But I'm mainly just kind of steering clear of him. I think there's, the other sleepers that we've mentioned. I think Broberg could be interesting as a flyer and kind of a pivot from Molinari. I kind of agree with you there. So the only player I'd really comment on would be Willett, because he's had something messed up with his shoulder a little bit.
All right, let's go get some questions. Right now is a great time for you to get in chat We'll answer them, and then we'll certainly be out of here. Believe it or not, what is it? They tee it up at like 1 o'clock in the morning or something. I think coverage starts at 4 a.m. on ESPN. So, hell, if you're out in the West Coast, you could just stay up and watch golf. 1 a.m. You could get it going there. Broberg and Fowler or Brendan Todd and Ernie Els?
I think Broberg and Fowler is your upside play there. If that's a cash game, though, I'd have a tough time going against Todd and Els. But for a GPP, I really like that upside combo of Broberg and Fowler. I think you could have, definitely one of those guys. Wouldn't be surprised if they're contending, especially Fowler, on the weekend.
Somebody asked about Jim Furyk. I'm a no-go on Furyk. How about you?
Yeah, he's not a guy that really contends for top tens and championships anymore. He's a guy that hangs around to the weekend. I think I read somewhere that it's been 5 or 6 years since he's really had a top 25 finish at the Open. 9,300, there's just too many other guys. He's right there with guys like Dustin Johnson and Ricky Fowler. I just don't think he's worth that price tag anymore.
Skeeter says, you got any thoughts on Keegan Bradley?
Again, a guy with not the greatest record at the Open Championship. I always get irritated with Bradley because when he's upset, everybody knows. When Keegan Bradley is not having a good time on the golf course, and he slumps his shoulders and he just gets down. Now, granted, other guys are emotional too, but I just can't stand when he does that, and then it seems like he just falls apart.
I can't stand him, and in the sense of, have you watched him try and like when he addresses the ball, like he's the slowest player I've ever seen.
And then he has the goofiest routine. I swear, the guy probably burns 50 calories every time he goes up to hit a golf ball. It's amazing.
I just want to punch him in the face. Like, seriously, I'm not on the course playing with him. I'm watching on TV, and I feel like, if he walked into my room here, I feel like I need to slug him to, get that smirk off his face and, speed it up a little bit. So slow. If anything, I'll say this much. Anybody who has to play with Keegan Bradley, that's a negative, because it's hard to kind of get in the groove when you got to put up with how his idiosyncrasies when he lines up the. It's just annoying. All right, a few other questions that we have in here.
So that's a no on Keegan Bradley for whoever asked.
Yeah, I used him in the past, but I don't know if I can again after I watched him the last time. Man, Duffner, Westwood, or Keegan Bradley. Boy, we're not a big fan of either of those three. I would say Westwood, though. I know he's the most expensive, so that's kind of the drawback to him, but I think he's the most likely to win out of those three.
Yeah, and hopefully that's a GPP lineup. I don't care for any of those guys for cash games, but he's the one I would be able to endorse.
Molinari or Justin Leonard? This is interesting because, some people might not want to use them both. Who do you like better when you consider the savings is
$900?
Get about $900. I mean, that's a pretty upgrade. I mean, when you looked at some of the 7K players, low 8K players, not overly impressive. So, which route would you go if you only were going to take one, Molinari or Justin Leonard?
Well, I like Leonard. I mean, he's a guy that if you want to play the pivot, I think it's perfectly fine to go down to him and upgrade somewhere else. Molinari is a guy that could get hot and finish in the top 10. He's a little bit more explosive than Leonard, but the chances of that happening are probably smaller than all of his owners are going to wish to think. So, again, I play so many different lineups that I'm kind of just playing it neutral on Molinari, and I'm taking him in about half, and we'll see where the chips fall. But I'm kind of grown on your side there, where if you're only playing one lineup or a small number of lineups, it might be worth it to play the fade, and I do like the savings that you get from Leonard. I think my percentage ownership of Molinari compared to the field will be about even. My percentage ownership of Leonard compared to the field will be a lot higher. So if you just want to use that analysis, I like Leonard a little bit more.
Sergio or Stenson in a GPP for you?
If it's just a GPP, I mean, I can see Stenson's ownership percentage being a lot higher. I think they have very similar upsides. It was basically a coin flip for me whether I wanted to list Stenson or Sergio in my article that I wrote. I chose Stenson. Doesn't mean I don't like Sergio just the same. So, I think Sergio's a great play there for a GPP. If it's just a cash game, Stenson might be a little bit safer given his huge track record.
Or, as our good friend Al Smizzle always says, The lobster, the steak. Why not have them both?
Take them
There you
both,
go.
yes.
Take them both. Absolutely. Let's see if there's any more real quick before we get out of here. Luke Donald, a good play. Luke Donald just isn't the same player he was a year and a half ago. I think that I'm not going that route. I think he's about 9K, pretty expensive, and just hasn't been in the right form this year.
Yeah, I've got a smattering of him on a couple GPP teams just because I don't think he'll be very highly owned, but it's more of a speculative play than anything. I don't really care for him too much.
All right, I think that's going to wrap us up for today. Certainly appreciate all you guys, coming and listening to the show, watching the show. Certainly wish you the best of luck. Remember, DraftKings, they opened up another $60,000 tournament, and they're 1,400 people short of filling it at $20 a piece on the entry field. Good chance that will fill, or at least come close. They've got free rolls out there as well, and I'm assuming, if you're watching this show, you're probably somewhat familiar with DraftKings, but if you haven't signed up to an account yet, make sure you go through our links. Support us here at Roto Grinders. That's the best way to do it. It allows us to kind of give you this, what I feel is pretty amazing live content on GrindersLive and a lot of different other avenues as well. So best way to support us, sign up through our links, and certainly hope you enjoyed the show. Justin, I enjoyed it. We don't get to do shows all that often. It's a lot of fun doing it, and it feels kind of good talking golf. I enjoyed my research, and hopefully it pays off for me. And I know Gibb did real well in the U.S. Open. I think in the big score on Draft Street, he had like a top 5 finish. So maybe since I'm taking his seat here, I can kind of fulfill that role. That sounds good to me.
Yeah, I mean, I joked around with him. It was around that time when I was on with Smiz for like the first time in forever, and he had a really huge night. And then I was on with Gibb for the first time in a while, and he had a really huge tournament on Draft Street that weekend. So this is the first time we've been on in a while, so maybe the good luck will rub off on you. Kind of hoping it makes its way to me for one of these with the big shows, but we can share the wealth.
I was going to say, Justin, you've done mighty, mighty fine running some trains here this MLB season, but you'll pick up a big one in golf for sure. But ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for us tonight. Thanks again for joining us here on Grinders Live. Remember, shows will kick back off again Friday, 3:30, as MLB will get going. Enjoy the golf. Kicks off again, TV coverage 4 a.m. Eastern time. Till Friday, everyone, have yourself a great couple of days. Enjoy the golf, and we'll see ya.